We like to call it the Supernatural Hour. And now, our hosts.
Hey, welcome to the Supernatural Hour. We're back. I'm Raven, by the way.
This is Doc.
I'm Emmett.
And Chad's here.
We're excited to be back with you today.
And Rogue wasn't with us today. She'll be back in the near future.
Yeah, she got to go hang out in Las Vegas for Thanksgiving, and now she's super tired. All the partying she did. Our main topic is brought to you by Oteos. It's a fabulous Mexican, and it's a little different Mexican, but you'll love it. There's 2 locations, Linden and Orem. Look it up.
Yeah, go out to their website. Look at the pictures of that Mexican food. It is high-end, and it is delicious.
It is beautiful, and it's delicious, too. I'll have to go again soon, and we'll talk about a specific dish. Okay, our main topic tonight is mental illness versus possession, paranormal activity. Now, I have to give a little disclaimer before we do this. I am so excited about this topic. I think this topic is fascinating, and Castle never let me do it. Did you hear that, Castle? I'm doing it. And I get why. This is a topic that can be very sensitive. It gets into a topic that's difficult. I've dealt with mental illness in my family, and it's not a pretty thing. It's not an easy thing to cope with, and it's nothing to make fun of. It's nothing to make light of. So one thing, when I took my demonology course, and one thing that any good paranormal investigator should be asking if someone is exhibiting signs of possession or, seeing things is, and I've actually had to ask this question a couple times of, are you taking any medications that, could be hallucinogenic? And we're not trying to say you're crazy, this isn't paranormal, but you just want to give the client the most accurate information. And if they're being possessed, we want to take care of the possession. If they're seeing things through the medication, we want to make sure that that's what it is, so they can contact their doctor and maybe have some adjustments or something on that on that part.
I'll add as well, I've seen a lot of people in psychotic states, and a lot of times they'll be hyper-religious. There'll be references to paranormal things. You'll see a lot of that overlay.
Right.
And I'm a fairly open-minded skeptic, so when it comes to a lot of this stuff, if I can pin it on mental illness, I'm probably going to pin it on mental illness. Sometimes there are things like making it rain inside, which may be a little difficult to pin on mental illness.
So before we jump into the topic, I want to just touch on just a couple other things. I think another reason why we haven't discussed this topic yet, besides the fact that it's sensitive, and you know how we are. We joke. We want we want you to know that if we do make light of something, it's just to lighten up a heavy topic. We are in no way, shape, or form making fun of mental illness. Like I've said before, I've dealt with it on a personal note, and it's not pretty. And it's, my heart goes out to anybody that deals with that. And I think we all have mental illnesses to a certain degree, every single person on the planet. But another reason it's such a broad topic. So tonight, we might do another round down the road, but tonight we want to talk about kind of 3 specific things, which are generalities, but that's a good place to start. So the first theory, does mental illness lead to possession? Kind of the second theory, does possession lead to mental illness? So kind of which comes first, the chicken or the egg? And then a third idea of, do cultures still blame mental illness or things they don't understand on the paranormal? And spoiler alert, I think yes to all, but let's delve into it.
Bring it on.
Okay, so let's kind of hit the first one. And honestly, the first one was the hardest one to find much stuff on. I had to kind of go from my own experience. But does mental illness lead to possession?
The little bit of research that I did, the time I had available, it was, what I found was that the medical industry, medical science, the medical profession, every time there were studies done comparing like paranormal episodes to classic psychotic episodes, but they would always try to when they were while they were differentiating it for the study, they would always try to find some other cause for the paranormal episode, like it was brought on by delusion or something. So I got the feeling that they were never really comparing, a classic psychotic episode to a real paranormal episode in the first place. They were trying to blow the paranormal episode off as something else, something behavioral and not paranormal.
Right. Like I said, of the three kind of talking points I wanted to hit on tonight, this one was the most difficult to find kind of where I wanted to go with it. Mm-hmm. That being said, two things. When we go and talk to a client, the phrase we will use is, these demonic entities, these type 3s, will always find the weak link. We always use the phrase, the low-hanging fruit, which has a negative connotation to it. And it shouldn't. The low-hanging fruit just means the fruit that's on the bottom of the tree stuff. That's the easiest to get. And these types of entities, they don't want to work very hard. Mm-hmm. They're super patient. They'll wait forever, but they don't want to work very hard.
Well, they'll ignore skeptics completely. Mm-hmm. You're right.
It's interesting, too, and you'll probably go into this, but mental illness is such a broad category. This can be anything from depression to anxiety to social phobias to
seeing little green people
to schizophrenia to straight
right.
up psychosis, right?
Eating disorders, everything.
Yeah, those are all
on the spectrum.
They're all varying types of mental illness. And I guess if you ask the question, can mental illness put you at risk for possession? If you believe that negative entities feed on negative energy and you deal with depression, yeah, I guess it seems plausible.
Exactly, and that's kind of where I was going with it, is if mental illness, a chemical, physical issue, with your psyche, is your weak link, these entities are going to work on that. We've seen it. We had an investigation in South Utah County, and this has been several years ago. There was a 14-year-old boy there who was autistic, and there was a demonic entity that was absolutely targeting him because his autism is also on a huge spectrum, and he manifested as being a little younger than his age, mentally, and the way he I don't know what the word is that I want.
Presented himself.
I thought, I know it starts with a P. The way he presented himself, you wouldn't have thought he was 14. You would have thought he was much younger. And so the entity, was making itself known to him and being his friend. And this young man was convinced that it was his friend. And no fault of this boy's. I mean, he was autistic. He, very trusting, very kind, very, very kind-hearted. And these entities, as you well know, if you followed us at all or followed this on any, good ghost hunting group, will tell you that these entities, the first step of possession is to get your trust. And we will tell you on public ghost hunts, if you're talking to little Sally Sue in the corner and she wants to come home with you, don't take her home because she's probably not little Sally Sue. It's probably Igor the Undying that wants to come home and try to possess you. And so, Igor the Undying was in this 14-year-old boy's home and was trying to convince him that he was his friend, and he was not his friend. We actually have some EVPs from that home, and it doesn't sound like any friend I want to have. One little thing I did find online I thought was very, very interesting. And I found a couple of things online, and a lot of people like to post things online and not cite who they are. So, this had no named author, but it's from a website called Spiritual Science Research Foundation.
It's online. It must be true.
That's
exactly.
Right. I read it on the internet.
Didn't Abraham Lincoln say that?
I'm sure he did.
Okay.
I read that on the internet.
Yeah.
I'm just assuming it's a he. Unknown author from the Spiritual Science Research Foundation kind of talked about this mental illness leading to possession, and he gave an analogy of a castle being attacked and under siege. And so, and he kind of talked about how the defense system included the walls and the archers, food it had in the granaries. So kind of, think of a person with all these different assets
Lines of defenses.
and lines of defenses. And the whole process could take a day. It could take years. It just kind of depends on how strong your defenses are, how many lines of defense you have, and everyone's going to be a little different. But once a castle's breached, the enemy is going to concentrate on expanding that breach and taking control of the castle, right? So, how long is it going to take to breach, these weaknesses? Two factors: vulnerability of the person being possessed. Are they vulnerable at a physical level or a mental level? And tonight we're kind of working on that mental level. So, where are they mentally? And he actually went into a comparative spiritual strength. And I found this interesting. They kept saying ghosts. We're going to say demonic entities because a ghost, to me, sounds nice. It said that these entities cannot attack or possess a person with 10% more spiritual strength than their own. Spirits of higher spiritual strength can possess a person of lower spiritual strength very easily, and spiritual strength is obtained through spiritual practice.
Where does the 10% thing come from?
He talked about it, and it was confusing, so I took
There's
it
like
out.
a spiritual strength-o-meter.
They did statistical runs with die rolls. It's like borrowed from Dungeons and Dragons.
It was a Dungeons and Dragons thing.
Yeah.
I'm a power 19.
Yeah.
There you go.
So think of it like muscles. If you're 10% muscularly stronger, you can overtake someone 10% less.
Right.
But it was more like a mental thing. How you measure that?
Yeah, but how
I
do you
don't know.
quantify? It's just weird that you would give a number, but then, I don't know how you actually measure that. No.
Right. And and everyone's going to be different. Everyone's
Yeah, that's even hard to measure, from a, human to human standpoint
Right.
on even, say, intelligence. Say you're 10% more intelligent. I mean, there's, some IQ tests and there's some
Right.
things that you can do, but it's pretty hard
And
to
now
say.
you're talking about
Yeah.
completely different entities.
Right.
Anyway,
the
tangent,
basic
sorry.
idea is the stronger the spirit is, the more a weak spirit's not going to be able to take
Right.
over
If
a
you're
strong-minded
well-fortified-
individual.
If you're well fortified, something's not going to be able to overtake you, basically.
Right. Because
as easily.
As easily.
Because we've run into some demonic entities that we've referred to as little gnomes, and they tuck tail and run pretty fast. They're not going to be taking over anybody. But, the stronger you are, the stronger of a entity you're going to need to take you
Well,
over.
old age and treachery beats youth and exuberance every time, and some of these demons are pretty old. They're pretty treacherous.
Right. They're patient. They'll wait till they find someone that they're 10% stronger than.
Or wait until they are. Yeah, exactly.
It's only 9%. I don't know.
We'll wait.
Give it an extra percent or four.
What have we got on the strength-o-meter?
So first they have to create an environment for the possession. And so they're going to take advantage of situations that destabilize the mind. So they're going to say, okay, this person, has a weakness in their defense in this area, and they're going to exploit that. They might do something along the lines of, physical things, a skin rash. They're going to take advantage of that. Or making a baby cry all night so that the parents are tired. And
That's straight out of hell right there.
right. But this is where the mental illness would come into play. If they notice something, whether it's autism, whether it's anxiety, whether it's something a little stronger than that, they're going to work on that and start to create the weakness in that foundation. The next step would be point of entry, which would be breaching the castle. And a big part of this is personality. So if the personality of the possessed person is weak, or the hoping to be possessed person is weak,
The target?
the target, that entity can possess that person at any time. So people are very vulnerable when they're overcome by desires, passions, being in an emotional state. And again, if you're, whatever your mental illness may be, if it's really wearing on you, if you're having an episode, and I mean that in the very kindest way, If you are presenting your mental illness, or the person is presenting their mental illness, that is a good time where this entity is going to say, you know what, now is a good time because they're really struggling with anxiety today. Or this is a great time because their depression's kicking them in the butt this afternoon.
Or exhaustion, or...
Right. Now, I don't want people to go, oh my gosh, I have depression and I'm having a really bad today.
Here come the demons.
Here come the demons. That's not what we're trying to say. This is actually extremely rare. Extremely rare. So please don't. Please
For me,
don't
the
get
demons
worried.
are more of a stomach thing, so
Oh,
not depression.
right.
Yeah.
So it says if the possessed person has a strong personality, the entity has to wait for an opportune moment. So the stronger you are, and anybody that has a mental illness, which again I said earlier, I think is all of us. I think we all have issues to one degree or another. And if you have that bad day or that bad week or that bad month, it's not all over. You're not, I give up, no, I'm possessed. Because everyone's got a really strong fortitude. Again, these are very, 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 very rare. So please don't worry about anything.
These may be risk factors, but it doesn't mean you're going to have problems necessarily.
Right. So if and this isn't just for mental illness, this could be for physical issues, or even just bad habits. For example, the example he gives is a spirit could possess an otherwise honest person, if they have a moment of a dishonest thought. And the possession, as we've talked about before, isn't going to be instantaneous, but they're going to work on you. Oh, dishonest person? They're thinking some dishonest things. So we're going to kind of scrape away at that foundation.
I even think of things like sleep deprivation. They mentioned making the baby cry all night, but that physical, and emotional toll that a lack of sleep's going to take on you might be caught in a moment of weakness.
Right. So really when it came to the idea of mental illness leading to possession, is it a possibility? Absolutely.
And I don't know if it's more leading to possession or becoming more open to possession.
Correct. It's just the whole point that I'm trying to make is if you're suffering with a mental illness and it's wearing on you, you could be open if an entity comes across and says, oh, I found this person. This is their weak link. We're going to work on that. But everybody on the planet has a weak link.
Right. But I would also add, if you want, the best thing you can do is to focus on your mental illness and take steps to, control or, alleviate the symptoms that you're experiencing.
Right. And for me, if you're suffering with a mental illness, that mental illness does not define you. That mental illness is not who you are. You are who you are that happens to be struggling with this weakness.
With the condition.
Right. And there's therapies, there's doctors, there's medicines, there's systems, there's help out there. So if you're struggling with a mental illness, please do what you can to find some help. And not just because of demonic. Again, a demonic possession is so rare, but just for your own peace of mind. Because again, I deal with it often. Not me, a family member, and it's rough. It's rough stuff. So the part that I found online that they talked about the most was the theory 2, which does possession lead to mental illness? And this one gets very religious, but I found it extremely interesting.
By definition, if you're possessed, wouldn't you be mentally ill?
Yes, that's what I would think.
I'm gonna say that would be my general take too, or from the perspective of the scientific community, right? Anybody who is exhibiting...
You're not of a sound mind.
Right. If you're exhibiting symptoms of possession, yeah, by default, you would have some degree of instability.
Right.
Right.
Well, and if you are possessed, you are not... Your mind is being suppressed. And it's the entity's behavior that's coming out. Okay, so the second theory, if you Google this is what the internet has blown up with. So we could talk about this one by itself for hours. We won't, though, so never fear. So does possession lead to mental illness? And we already kind of discussed, if you're being possessed, it's not your mind that's working, it's something else's mind that's working. They don't have a body for a reason, and they don't know how to work a body. And they're angry and they're mad. But we're gonna read some scripture here. Anyone opposed to some scripture? So Matthew 8:28 in the New Testament. And when he was come to the other side of the country of Gergesenes, there met him two possessed with devils, coming out of the tombs, exceeding fierce, so that no man might pass by that way. And behold, they cried out, saying, What have we to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of God? Art thou come hither to torment us before the time? And there was a good way off from them an herd of many swine feeding. So the devils besought him, saying, If thou cast us out, suffer us to go away into the herd of swine. And he said unto them, Go. And when they were come out, they went into the herd of swine, and behold, the whole herd of swine ran violently down a steep place into the sea, and perished in the waters. And they that kept them fled, and went their ways to the city, and told everything, and what was befallen to the possessed of the devils. So that's in Matthew. So we know, if you believe in the Bible, that there are spirits and they do possess entities. I found it interesting. That was a story in Matthew. Matthew's like me. He gives you just the facts. You can read the exact same story. It was either in Mark or Luke. I thought I wrote it down, but I didn't. He gives more detail. Same story, more detail. And I won't read the entire thing to you, but I'll give you just the other details that you're missing. Jesus came out of the ship, and there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no man could bind him, no, not with chains, because that he had oft been bound with fetters and chains, and the chains had been plucked asunder, and the fetters broke in pieces, neither could any man tame him. So he was wild, and he had superhuman strength. He could break any bounds that held him. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains and the tombs, crying and cutting himself with stones. But when he saw Jesus afar off, ran and worshipped him. And then they talk. We've already discussed this. And then he said, "What is thy name, Jesus?" And he answered, "My name is Legion, for we are many." So, and the rest of the story we've already talked about. But just, some of this, and if you don't believe in devils and you see someone that's breaking these chains and just crazy and wild, you would think that man has some serious mental issues going on. So in Acts 19:13, there's another story. Then certain of the vagabond Jews, exorcists, took upon them to call over them which had evil spirits in the name of the Lord Jesus, saying, We adjure you by Jesus whom Paul preached. All right. Hey, stay spooky, my haunty friends.
Have a good one.
See you next time.
Hey, good night.
Answered and said, Jesus I know, and Paul I know, but who are ye? And the man in whom the evil spirit was leapt on them and overcame them and prevailed against them, so they fled out of the house naked and wounded. So there's another man that is possessed of a devil. The devil came out and said, when I say the devil, the demonic entity, knew who Jesus was, knew who Paul was, didn't know who the other men were, jumped on them, attacked them, and they, attacked them to the point that they had no clothes on anymore, apparently, because they left the house naked and wounded.
So that would be little d devil, not big D devil.
Yes. Here we go. Another story in Matthew 17:14. And when they were come to the multitude, there came to him a certain man, kneeling down to him and saying, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is a lunatic and sore vexed, and oft times he falleth into the fire and oft into the water. And I brought him to thy disciples, and they could not cure him. So there we've got falling down. He's a lunatic. He's falling into the fire. He's falling. He can't walk normally. And they're not sure what's wrong with him either. Then Jesus answered him and said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer you? Bring him hither to me. And Jesus rebuked the devil, and he departed out of him, and the child was cured from that very hour. Apparently it's Mark. So here's the same story with a little more detail in Mark. And I won't read the whole thing because I just read it. But he said, Master, I have brought unto thee my son, which hath a dumb spirit. And wheresoever he taketh him, he teareth him, and he foameth, and gnasheth his teeth, and pineth away. And so they brought him unto Jesus, and when he saw him, straightway the spirit tare him, and he fell on the ground and wallowed foaming. And he asked his father, How long is it ago since this came to him? And he says, Of a child. And ofttimes it has cast him into the fire and into the waters to destroy him. But if thou canst do anything, have compassion on us and help us. And then people came running to see. And then when Jesus saw the people come running together, he rebuked the foul spirit, saying unto him, Thou dumb and deaf spirit, I charge thee, come out of him, and enter no more into him. And the spirit cried and rent him sore, and came out of him, and was as one dead, insomuch that they said, He is dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. So there's several accounts in the scriptures, and I didn't even read all of them because this is not
The Jesus Hour?
this isn't the Jesus Hour. But if you Google this, and if you want to see more, stories and more talks of spirits possessing people in the scriptures, they're there. Those are just some of the ones that I found interesting. Do I think that this is a thing? Yes. Mm-hmm. I think that people who may not have a diagnosable mental illness that are possessed for whatever reason. I mean, this one that we just read about was a child. Why was this child possessed? Well, we don't know. It doesn't talk about that. But just because someone is acting like as it says here, a lunatic, doing strange things, foaming at the mouth, falling into the fire, attacking people, breaking chains, it can absolutely, right, if you believe Scripture, be a possession.
From a medical perspective, especially in the case of this child, I was thinking, man, is this kid having seizures, right? And the reason for that is the, acting as if you were dead afterwards, the foaming at the mouth. A lot of times they get crazy confused and they get combative, either before or particularly after seizure-like episodes. And so, I would assume this was some form of possession if Jesus casted the devils out and everything was fine. But it is interesting that, everything that they listed there, I'm like, I see this in people who have seizures all the time. They foam at the mouth, they act crazy. Sometimes they try to fight me when I try to help them. And then eventually, after they'll have these long postictal phases where they just blank out and just lay there. And you're like, waving your hand over their eyes. Are you still alive? What's going on? I could definitely see that as epilepsy.
And the scriptural passage didn't even present it as something evil. It just described it symptomatically.
Just is what it is.
And then, the Lord comes along and
it says, get out of there.
You're cured.
Yeah, and maybe epilepsy is a demon. I don't know. I mean, I mean that in the sense that, people talk about how they deal with their demons, that they have a problem. And, maybe it was a medical issue that Jesus cured.
Like a blindness.
Yep.
Right. And see, and that's why this to me is so fascinating, is because it's the whole, which comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Mm-hmm. Science says it's the chicken. I saw a YouTube video on that the other day.
Oh, we're going to get to chickens in a minute.
Science.
Well, chickens is coming up.
Perfect.
We have more chickens. All right. Do we want to discuss any more about this aspect?
Yeah, just, even a couple of the other cases that you mentioned, the one who was cutting himself with stones, we see a lot of self-injurious behavior in things like borderline personality disorder, for example, and people that are full-blown psychotic. I mean, there are people who have, schizophrenia and sometimes will go psychotic, people who have bipolar disorder and go to manic episodes. And so even in each of these cases where Jesus came and healed an individual who was exhibiting demonic possession, as you read through those stories, I mean, I can definitely pin some medical diagnosis to almost each and every one of those.
Right. And I tend to be a very religious person, but I don't discredit the first theory that we talked about. Mm-hmm. That being said, I absolutely believe that Satan, the actual devil, the big D devil, doesn't want the world to know that he's around, doesn't want to know that possessions by these entities can happen. And so I think he loves to downplay it. Now, I'm not saying that epilepsy is not a thing. It's absolutely a thing. Is it sometimes caused by a negative entity? I believe yes. Is it also caused by purely physical, chemical things? I also think yes.
So what you're saying is, could there be symptoms that would be easy to pin on epilepsy that aren't necessarily epilepsy?
Yes. That being said, if I were in the medical field, I wouldn't just say demon, because
Damn, that would make my job so much easier.
I don't think they have a code for that. Is there a way to build that?
Demonic possession.
Yeah, no, there's
not my problem.
the eye, the evil eye.
Mal, yeah, you got Mal de Ojo. Or,
But there's not one for demons.
no,
Okay.
I don't think demonic. I will look. That is, I mean, there's this gigantic, ICD-10 code thing. So I'm going to put in demonic possession and just see what comes up. I'm going to put it in the little search bar.
I'm interested. We want to hear about this
All right,
podcast.
I will return and report.
Inquiring minds want to know.
So, but the idea is, this could be one of two things. And so as an investigator, in order, just like Doc doesn't want to just say you have a demon and go home when it could be fixed medically because it's a medical issue. If we go into a house, we don't want to say, oh, it's absolutely a demon because we're ghost hunters and we want that to happen. And then, the next week they die because they didn't go in.
Well, if
and
we're
get
not
medical
careful,
attention.
one day we'll have to have a license to do this, and we don't want that.
Right. And so that's why, we have to say, are there any medications that you're taking that could possibly, are there any medications you should be taking and aren't? And, and we always preface it with, we just have to ask for your own safety and, to give you accurate information.
And methamphetamine doesn't count as a medication, but you should still let us know.
We have dealt with that. We had one gal, I told Castle, I said, you need to get here because she is either high or possessed.
And he did the sobriety test, and it was high.
She was high. So see, we don't always jump to demon. There is one more little aspect I want to talk about this. My mom, when she found out, if you've listened to us at all, you've heard this story a time or two, but we'll go into a little more depth. When Castle and I first started doing this, my mom was pretty convinced that we were evil and going to hell. And she brought us a book called Into the Darkness, I believe. And in this book, she thought that she was going to show us. When we post this up on YouTube, I'll have a picture of it in there so that you can see it, and I'll put a picture of this book up on TikTok. But she was going to convince us out of our evil ways. And so she gave me a copy for Christmas and Castle a copy for Christmas. And it's a pretty easy read. I mean, it's very interesting. It's a good book, but it's an easy read. And it's not very big. And so I was able to finish it in about 2 hours. And I gave Castle a call. I said, did Mom give you the same book she gave me? And he goes, yep. I said, did you read it? He goes, yep. I said, it kind of validates everything we're doing, right? And he says, yep. And I said, I don't think she read it. And he says, nope, I don't think she did. It's a book by an LDS author, and he is a seminary teacher. And he actually dealt with, over the course of his career, 2 or 3 kids that had been, possessed, and, working with them on getting that taken care of. Just the things that he said, that they were presenting to him could have been misdiagnosed as a mental illness, when in the case of these 2 or 3 kids, it was actually possession. So it's just something that, whether you're in the medical field, whether you're in the paranormal field, you really want to figure out so that people can get the proper help.
Well, that's where his, knowledge of the family came in handy, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely. Kind of our third little concept, and again, I know we're really kind of breezing over this. Our purpose isn't to help you get your doctorate in any topic ever. We just kind of want to get you thinking and toss around some ideas for you. If you guys want to hear more about this and want to hear more in depth, you can just let us know. Just email us, drop us a line, and comment on our YouTube, and we can get a little bit more into it. But the third kind of topic we're going to hit on tonight: do cultures still blame mental illness, possession, or things they don't understand on the paranormal.
Absolutely.
Aliens.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of the modern take, right?
It's aliens.
Aliens.
Everything's aliens. If you don't know what it is, it's aliens.
Mm-hmm. I could say, I spent a little time in Tanzania, and there's not very many, the established medical system there is not very developed. And so most people, when they don't feel well, their first stop is to go to the witch doctor. And overwhelmingly, guess what a witch doctor is going to tell you?
Demons.
Yeah, you're possessed by something, right? And here's a mixture of herbs or whatever that you need to take to be cured. Right. And so, and when I was working at the National Hospital there, helping with the residency program, oftentimes I would see people come in and, they were throwing up. And, what I saw looked like coffee ground emesis. That's stuff we worry about in terms of, we think that people may have gastrointestinal bleeding. And the first time I saw it, I was taken back a little bit. And one of the Tanzanian, residents and doctors that I worked with said, "It's just herbs, man." that's what they do. So, I do know that people blame, mental illness on the paranormal for sure, or not even necessarily mental illness, just any type of ailment.
Just anything
can be blamed
or
on
just
spirits.
Bad luck and misfortune.
Exactly. That it can be attributed to some form of spirit.
Right.
Your cow died.
Yeah.
Your chicken died.
You have headaches. You whatever. There's that's kind of the first step in some of these rural parts of Tanzania.
So, Doc, getting back to the witch doctor thing, with some of these are some of the remedies, and I know you didn't go into this thoroughly, but may some of those remedies, some of the things that they suggest be helpful? Or placebo. I mean, placebo could be a part of it, but may years and centuries of hand down information of they're exhibiting this,
right.
Eat these roots.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's acylic acid, it's a form of aspirin,
Yeah.
and they learned it through trial and error and that kind of thing.
Is evil spirits just what they call bacteria?
Right. I think you're right. Some of these remedies, I don't know because I obviously hadn't followed up on the success of these treatments, but the fact that they continue to be used throughout time may give some credence to an active ingredient that may be curative for whatever
Certain
the
things.
ailment is, right? I have no doubt. That's how we discovered a whole bunch of medicines.
One guy 10,000 years ago pulled through, so
Yeah.
hey, that's the stuff. Stick with that.
They kept trying it,
Right.
and, over time, it's anecdotal evidence at that point. I try this, and this is what I see, but once you get enough of it, you can start.
It's a trend.
Yeah, you can start realizing, I could either try it or not. It wouldn't surprise me at all.
Right. There was actually a study done by Neuner, Pfeiffer, Schausser, Kaiser, Odenwald in 2012.
Just based on the name alone, I believe it.
You believe it?
Yeah, whatever it is.
That's credible.
Credible name.
They actually investigated the prevalence of CEN, C-E-N, which was a local variant of a spirit possession in Uganda. And a CEN is a form of a spirit possession where the ghost of a deceased person visits the affected individual and replaces his or her identity. So basically just a possession. And this study was done in youths between the age of 12 and 25 in war-affected regions of northern Uganda. And they compared them to youths who had been abducted and forced to fight as child soldiers. They had an army called the Lord's Resistant Army. And they waged this long, brutal war to overthrow the government of Uganda. And they compared them with youths that have never been abducted. So they reported that spirit possession was significantly higher in the former abducted child soldiers than in the non-abductees. They also found reports of the spirit possession were related to trauma, exposure, such as sexual assault or being forced to kill, to psychological distress, and to higher rates of suicide and post-traumatic stress disorder. But this still goes back to me, to the chicken or the egg. Were they weakened because of all of this stuff to the point that they were just very, very vulnerable to actual spirit possession? Or is it just so traumatic that it affected their psyche.
Mm-hmm. And I think either is plausible.
Absolutely.
Or likely.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, that's interesting just to say, hey, people who have been through some serious stuff, people who have, cause for duress, for psychological pain and torment are reporting possession at a higher level. I mean, this is a study that was done that showed that, right?
right, the basic conclusion was that areas of the world where beliefs about possession are widely held, they're usually the standard consequence for psychological trauma.
So there's an association there for sure.
Right. And then again, is that the actual thing? Or is Satan trying to downplay it? Or... Oh, Castle. Why couldn't I talk about this until now? So there's many ancient civilizations such as Egypt, China, Babylon, Greece, believed that people exhibiting symptoms of psychopathology were possessed by bad spirits. Actually, today we call it as demonology now, and that the only way to exorcise those bad spirits was with elaborate ritualized ceremonies that frequently involved direct physical attacks. And the idea was they would force the demons out. You punch you in the face, the demon will just fly out the back of your head, sort of a thing.
Punch this demon out of you.
Oh, that's like the Japanese people that step out in front of moving cars to try to scare the demon away that's possessing them, right?
Yeah, they said through torture, flogging, starvation. But not surprisingly, such actions usually just make it worse. Whether you're actually...
Some dude's already messed up. We're going to mess him up a whole lot more.
It's like, we don't care if it's physical, mental, demonic. We're just going to make it worse. So, yeah, don't... If you're trying to exorcise someone...
Don't punch it out of them.
Don't do that. Don't do that. So here's just a little interesting tidbit. Talking about exorcists. The United States, and this is hilarious how they wrote this. The United States is home to about 50 stable, and they put it in quotation marks, exorcists. 50 stable exorcists. There's a lot of crazies out there.
So like 50 people you'd actually invite into your home?
Yes.
Okay.
Is this through the Catholic Church?
Are these accredited?
I'll just read it. The United States is home to about 50 stable exorcists, those who have been designated by bishops to combat demonic activity on a semi-regular basis. And this is actually up from just 12 10 years ago. And this is according to a gentleman by the name of Reverend Vincent Lambert. He's an Indianapolis-based priest exorcist who is active in the International Association of Exorcists. And he himself, on a personal level, receives about 20 inquiries a week, double the number from when his bishop appointed him in 2005. And I have noticed that, just as an investigator, it seems like our investigations on a residential seem to get a little crazier every year. So I don't know if people are just having more issues with mental illness. I don't know if there's an uptick in demonic activity or a little bit of both.
It's probably COVID.
We'll blame COVID.
I bet you could draw parallels with the increase in the homeless numbers.
Probably.
It's just a general
Trend?
feature in society, across a wider spectrum.
In conclusion, I'm going to talk about just two brief little things. Jump in if you want. There's a man by the name of Chris Cook. He's an honorary professional fellow in the Department of Theology and Religion at Durham University, formerly a consultant psychiatrist working in the field of alcohol misuse. That's a mouthful. And he said, these three questions, kind of meaning the three that we talked about, are by no means exhaustive, but they do touch upon chief points that you should explore as you seek to determine the source of a person's problem. We need to have high regard for the scriptures and not be afraid to identify sin when we see it, whether in ourselves or in others. But we should also have a high regard for the good gifts that God has given in the creation of humanity, such as mathematics, science, literature, and even medicine. Psychiatry is a medical science, one devoted to the study, diagnosis, and treatment of the human mind, one of the most fascinating organs of the human body. We should not be too quick to dismiss the diagnosis of a medical physician, especially if we are not trained in medicine ourselves.
I liked how initially that felt like medicine was an also-ran.
Yes,
even medicine, guys.
Right. And the thing I liked
believe
about
it or not.
And tarot cards, and
That's right. Just right above reading bones or whatever. Yeah.
Hold on to your hat.
Tea leaves.
So I actually misquoted that. That wasn't Chris Cook. That was also a no-named author, but it was on the Westminster Seminary, California page. And there was initials VFT, so I think VFT might have been the author on that one. But what I liked about that is he said both. It could either be physical or it could be spiritual. Go figure out which one it is and get the proper help. And honestly, that is what I feel. So what I want to do before we finish our main topic and go on to junk drawer, I want to kind of hear everyone's thoughts. Who wants to start?
I'll start.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there are aspects of both. That mental illness can lead to possession, because if someone is weak because of a mental illness, if there's something that's going on, they're more likely to be a target by entities looking to take advantage. But I think the other way can also go in. I think that entities can target someone and work on them and break them down and get them to the point where they're mental illness. But I think in both cases, it's not just the spiritual end of it. There's also the physical end of it. If your body is healthy and working correctly, this gets back to, how strong are you? And this can be actually not just spiritually strong, but how strong is your body? When you're whole, both spiritually and physically, you have much higher defenses.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I want to add to that, because someone's going to be listening to this thinking, I'm not a strong person. I can guarantee anybody listening to this, and I'm going to say anybody on the planet, you are much stronger than you think you are. Every single person out there. Doc, what are your conclusions?
I see an awful lot of psychosis, either induced by things like methamphetamine, or people who, have schizophrenia and are having an episode. I don't know. It's hard to... I think it would be hard to distinguish sometimes, because I've seen some stuff where I'm like, oh my gosh, this does not seem normal, right? Generally, healthy doses of sedatives help. In either event, I'm sure. I wish I could share stories, but probably won't right now.
The HIPAA.
That's right.
HIPAA in effect right there.
HIPAA. But no, there's been times where I've, people who suffer from psychotic episodes tend to be hyper-religious, tend to be hypersexual. And when we think about demonic possession, a lot of times there's a focus on spiritual things and sometimes very vulgar stuff, right? That's something that seems to be a key aspect of demonic possession, is that people tend to, say vulgar things. And I see that even with psychosis. So I think it is hard to tease out.
Right. We have dealt with a couple of actual full-on possessions, a time or three, and we've actually gotten texts from demonic entities. And you can tell just by the language, just the words they use, the grammar they use, and it's
the
all
Latin
the same.
they use.
The Latin they use.
Written backwards. I don't know. It's weird.
It's, every time I've seen it or heard it, you just go, oh.
You know what the data rates are to hell?
Yeah.
That's bad.
Price per text message?
They're usually short.
They're stuck back in like 3G. That is hell, right?
Video.
there.
You can't get video. It's
They're using Nokia phones down there, guys.
Blackberries.
Takes forever to load up. Emmett, what are your conclusions?
Earlier I was thinking, as you were referencing scripture, I wonder if there was the equivalent of a cat lady in Judea, back then. So,
I'm sure there was.
Obviously anything that's going to weaken you, it's like what Chad was saying. If it's a medical condition or spiritual, anything that's going to weaken you is going to open you up for other problems.
So my conclusion, and I've said this a couple times actually. I'm just so excited to talk about my conclusions. I believe in all three. I think all three are absolutely plausible. It depends. And I just want to talk about a fellow. He's a board certified psychiatrist and a professor of clinical psychiatry at New York Medical College. He has studied at Princeton. He's trained at Yale in psychiatry and psychoanalysis at Columbia. So he's very much, sorry, I just had a bug following me, very much knowledgeable.
Right, this is his specialty.
And he wouldn't have used that sentence that I just used because that was extremely poor grammar. But, he's well-versed in this stuff. And he says he has personally encountered demonic possession and is convinced that possession is much more widespread than anyone is willing to admit. He says, I've helped clergy from multiple denominations and faith to filter episodes of mental illness, which represent the overwhelming majority of cases, from literally the devil's work. It's an unlikely role for an academic physician, but I don't see these two aspects of my career in conflict. The same habits that shape what I do as a professor and psychiatrist, open-mindedness, respect for evidence, and compassion for suffering people, led me to aid in the work of discerning attacks by what I believe are evil spirits, and just as critically, differentiating these extreme, rare events from medical conditions.
I like that. The fact that he mentioned, too, overwhelmingly, it's mental illness.
Yeah.
It's some form of medical condition that's causing these problems. But he's also willing to acknowledge that there's some stuff that does not make sense from a medical perspective.
Well, he wants to get the right treatment to the right people.
Exactly.
Yeah, even if it's not necessarily a medical diagnosis, it's more of a spiritual thing, he's willing to defer and say, nope, this is not drug psychosis, this is not schizophrenia, this is not a manic episode, there's something else going on.
There's no code for possession, so I can't write it up.
That's right. I'd love to bill you for this, but I can't.
Yeah, he says, is it possible to be a sophisticated psychiatrist and believe that evil spirits are, however seldom, assailing humans? Most of my scientific colleagues and friends say no because of their frequent contact with patients who are deluded about demons, their general skepticism of the supernatural, and their commitment to employ only standard, peer-reviewed treatments that do not potentially mislead, a definite risk, or harm vulnerable patients. But careful observation of the evidence presented to me in my career has led me to believe that certain extremely uncommon cases can be explained no other way.
I think I agree with that sentiment.
Yep. So I like that because it kind of said, yeah, it's rare, but it can't be explained any other way. We might revisit some other aspects of this topic
I thought that was a very interesting topic.
another day.
And an important topic also.
My recommendation, eat well, sleep well, exercise, and get help when you need it. There you go.
Sounds like good sane advice to me.
Check out our shop at advancedparanormal.com for all your paranormal needs. Sage spray, sage lavender, roller jars, etc. Everything you need.
We have it.
It's a cool website.
Awesome. Speaking of websites, how's our YouTube and TikTok presence coming along?
Really good. We're up to almost 1,700
All right.
on our TikTok likes. But I'm getting ready to go back to school, so I've kind of been involved in scholarship applications. So I'll get back on the TikTok.
As opposed to TikToking.
Yeah, trying to be responsible.
Well, we're on TikTok. What is our I'm not on TikTok.
You need to get on TikTok and be a follower.
Well, yeah, apparently. How do we find you? How do we find Supernatural Hour / Advanced Paranormal on TikTok?
So you just search for advanced.paranormal.
Advanced.paranormal.
And then you give us a like.
And on YouTube, it's just Supernatural Hour.
YouTube.com/Supernatural Hour. And we have 125 subscribers. If you haven't subscribed, please go out and subscribe. Tell your friends to.
Stay spooky, my haunty friends.
Love you, Nicholas.
Have a good one.
Hey, good night.
Good night.
You've been listening to the Supernatural Hour at AdvancedParanormal.com. The Supernatural Hour is part of the Radio Ronin network found at RadioRonin.com. Copyright 2021 by Advanced Paranormal Services.